And here we are, episode 59.
This is going to be a short episode again because we are busy, or at least it's pretty late on Robert's end, and I've got some stuff going on. So we'll try and zip through this one.
Yeah, that's right. Some episodes end up longer than others. So, did you want to start with your topic, or shall I start with the great man of history?
Well, why not I start off? So one thing I've kind of heard a lot during the course of the past few years is, learn to code is the big kind of jargon for people who are kind of looking for work and kind of complaining about how unfair the system is and so forth. And I suppose that was true because there's more to it than that, but it seemed like a quasi competent thing to say at the time. But a lot of things I'm noticing recently is that the notion of AI technology taking over certain programmers' jobs, and the people who adhered to learn to code are then being cast out of the very profession they went into. Or at least that's the prevailing narrative today, I
Mhm.
think.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to, because I'm in the software industry, and I believe, without going into too much detail, you're in IT as well. So I think this will be a perfect subject for us to kind of toss around. So, what do you have? Is this more Luddite fallacy, or is there some kind of truth to
So,
this? Like,
okay,
because
so yes,
AI is real now, so.
right. So I've got quite a few thoughts on this. Okay, so I think we've talked about this before, and I believe we did talk about the Luddite fallacy. I think probably last time actually. But anyway, I'm just going to briefly go over it. Go over it just so people have got an idea. So a Ludd, whose first name I keep meaning to look up because I've actually forgotten his first name, but he led a group of people in the UK about 250 years ago, England, or probably might have been at the time, and they were going around smashing machines in factories because they believed that machines would ultimately lead to mass unemployment and the fall of civilization. Really, they were doing everyone a favor, they thought, okay. But it didn't happen. The machines didn't lead to the fall of mass unemployment and the fall of civilization. And time again, innovations have occurred over the last 250 years. And these innovations, some people, not Ludd this time because he was dead by then, would have proclaimed that there'll be mass unemployment, fall of civilization. Okay. And it didn't happen again and again and again. And eventually, some people started calling it the Luddite fallacy. So, for about 250 years, people have been making this proclamation that latest innovation, X, okay, will cause mass unemployment and result in the destruction of society. Now, I'm not 250 years old, so I haven't been arguing it for 250 years, but I have been arguing it for about 30 years. And for about 30 years, people have been saying this to me. Oh, people in IT will be out of work. This group will be out of work because machines will take your jobs, whatever. Okay. And I would say, no, it hasn't happened in the past. There's a long history of it not happening, and it's not going to happen this time. And you know what? So far, for 30 years, I've been right every time I've said it. Okay. Now the question is, will I be right for 35 years? I don't know, but let's find out. Okay. So, what's interesting about this is most of the people I've mentioned this to, a few of them I actually said to you, I've said to them, I hope you remember this conversation because I'd like to talk to you about it in 5 years. And in a few cases, I actually did meet them in a few years' time, brought it up, and strangely enough, none of them remembered the conversation, which was really interesting. Anyway,
Yeah,
but I will
yeah.
say,
Sure,
yeah,
they didn't remember. Yeah.
sure, exactly. But now, having said that, actually, one friend of mine did actually, and because he's a very honest fellow, he actually did remember the conversation from 10 years ago. About 10 years ago, somebody we both knew was saying, "Oh, the cloud AWS is going to wipe out all your IT jobs. You'll all be unemployed in a couple of years." And I said, "No, no, Luddite fallacy. It's not going to happen. Okay, jobs might change. They might become more complex. Whatever it happens to be, you might have to learn some new stuff, but you won't be unemployed. There'll still be work to do, right?" And this friend of mine did remember that conversation, which I had actually forgotten that one, and he conceded I was right that time. But he is also arguing that AI is going to leave everybody unemployed and hopefully not the fall of civilization. But anyway, and I pointed out Luddite fallacy, and that's when he conceded that 10 years ago he was present when I had said this conversation made this argument previously. So here we are again. Okay, AI, the web, the internet, because it would allow people to outsource jobs to cheaper countries, various machines, textile 250 years ago, what are the name of those looms? I've got it written down actually.
Yeah, Jacquard loom. Yeah,
Yeah, yes, thank you very much. That's it. I actually had it written down.
yeah.
Yes, right. That was going to destroy people's jobs too. None of them did. I
Hmm.
don't think AI will either. It won't cause mass unemployment. It won't cause the fall of civilization. Will it change? Will it make some people's jobs? Will it make them, remove some people's jobs? Absolutely. In fact,
Sure.
an IT manager I knew about 30 years ago said that he started work as a typesetter, and realized within a few years that was a dead end, and he migrated to other areas, right? So as long as
Hmm.
people are prepared to learn, as long as we're prepared to adapt to new technologies, and I do concede that as we get older, that can get harder, right?
Hmm.
But as long as society is prepared to adapt, then obviously this isn't a problem because people, they new jobs. So jobs are destroyed, individual types of jobs, but new jobs are created by technology, and
Right.
that's the key point that Luddite fallacy generally fails to see. Yes, jobs, individual jobs, do get destroyed. That's proven. That's obviously true, but new jobs, and sometimes it's often actually entire new classes of jobs are created. Who would have, in the early 1990s, when Tim Berners-Lee was developing the World Wide Web, who would have imagined something like search engine optimization as something people did as a job, right? And yet now there are companies who do that and people who specialize in it, and you pay companies to provide you information to optimize your search results. So entire new classes of work will appear. And there's an interesting argument I heard recently that it might be more in the future. A human might be more of a manager, it might be more managerial role where you're outsourcing more tasks to AIs to perform them, but you're still collating it, making sure it's all correct, and delivering it to other humans and so forth.
Right.
There's an interesting argument too about this is only recent, I think. It's been proposed quite recently because one of the things, while it's been recognized for a long time that AI, that new technologies don't just destroy jobs, they also create jobs. One of the things that's been lacking is kind of a mechanism. They haven't really, nobody, as far as I know, has sort of conclusively argued why this is the case. I think a few ideas have been put forward, but I heard an interesting one recently that it's actually a function of the complexity of society. I think I did mention that on a previous episode too.
You might
One of
have.
the interesting, right, one of the interesting things about that is it actually it goes to some way to explain also why people aren't working less in general, because they surveyed people around the late 19th century, early 20th century. Really, technological innovation was really starting to pick up, and they asked people, "What's it going to be like in 100 years, 150 years?" And they would always say, "Oh, everyone will have work 4 hours a day if you want, or a lot of people won't work, and so forth. We'll be living in a utopia, right?" And it never happened. And in actual fact, in a lot of jobs, work hours are actually creeping up, which would be the opposite of what would be happening if, in fact, we were all heading towards unemployment, right?
Right.
So, right. And so one recent proposal has to do with this being to do with the complexity of society. There are a lot more different jobs now, okay? And so you need people for all those different roles. And as a result, this is one of the reasons why employment has stayed up and the demand for people is actually increasing. I mean, the unemployment rate across the Western world now is lower than it's been in a long time. It's gone up and down, global financial crisis and whatnot, but generally speaking, it's actually stayed fairly low. So anyway, that's an interesting idea that's been put forward. As I said, that the idea that it's really about the complexity in society. One idea that I'd had even before I'd heard that actually was that I feel that more and more people, and I know I've talked a lot, so I have to give you a chance. More and more people will probably be doing auditing jobs in the future. And it's already happened, right? So over the last few decades, there are a lot more people doing auditory jobs, essentially cross-checking systems, because we have very complex systems. And if those systems fail, people can get hurt and it can cost a lot of money and so forth. And you need people checking those systems and making sure that they're working. And yes, you could argue you could get AI to do that too, but there's a lot to be said for having a human doing it as well as the AI. Anyway, so I've spoken a lot, and I probably should give you a chance to jump in.
Yeah, exactly. Because uh, there's been a lot of like sometimes I see some kind of video or at least a recommended video on YouTube when I'm kind of hanging around on YouTube, and there'll be like an AI company warns that AI is going to take over programmers' jobs. There'll be no programming jobs left. So it's a bit of a kind of a scaremongering sort of a thing, right? And and I've kind of mentioned AI before, when it comes to things like music and kind of like its auto generation and kind of and some of the warnings against that and from a copyright perspective and so forth. So I'm actually wondering though, it's funny that you mentioned that more technology proliferates, the more jobs will proliferate even more in different forms, right? Like in different kinds of jobs. Well, I'm foreseeing, like a humanity market kind of opening up, uh, as in the not AI generated. It's somewhat like a backwards kind of a demand, that's a
100%.
yeah, exactly. Because in the realm of music, I don't know how prevalent this is, but and maybe something like video, not just music, but the demand for analog, like
Yes.
we had some vinyl, cassette tapes, CDs. It's at least said that they're trying to make a resurgence at some point. We've seen vinyl do this to an extent in the past decade, uh, if at least in a form of faddism or so forth. Now, I'm not 100% convinced that vinyl is that much better than a compact, like a good compact disc and so forth. But I understand the need for physicality and investment that what I reluctantly call human element. I think human element is too vague. But I think you see what I'm seeing here,
I
right? Saying here,
I know
right? Like
exactly where you're going. And in actual fact, this is a point I've made too, even to people in my personal life who have raised concerns about AI. And I've said, as well as a lot of those arguments I just mentioned, another argument is that there is very much a backlash. And I would almost say it's developing, but I would say it's actually developed now. There's a noticeable backlash towards AI. If you look at somewhere like Quora or you look even on YouTube or something like that, and you will see people rejecting a video on YouTube because it's an AI voice. They're
yeah.
rejecting an answer on Quora because it's an AI answer. Okay. There really is some sort of backlash appear where people are valuing human input rather than just something that an AI that, and I think they see that as because of the effort. They realize somebody hasn't actually put any effort in. They've just used an AI to generate it versus actually spending the time and contributing something, which then the person, enjoys reading or enjoys listening to perhaps. And in fact, another example that I hadn't thought of actually just occurred to me while you were speaking. So there really is almost a bit of a trend towards disconnecting and going offline now as well. This spending this party time offline, right? Board games actually is an example of this we're both into, and okay, and it's a booming hobby, really
Mhm.
is. You know what? I've been board gaming since I was a kid, right? And it's that's a grey beard. It's been a while since I was a kid, right? When I was about 12, the consensus, well, maybe it's up to about sort of even 18. The consensus was that board gaming was dying, okay, and that we might be the last generation of board gamers. And there was sort of some concern about that. And then somewhere around my 20th birthday, it exploded and took
Yeah.
off. And that was around 30 years ago. And it's been booming ever since. And more than ever, actually. I've just this weekend discovered there's actually a board game shop in my suburb where I live. I didn't know this. There's ones nearby that I knew of that I could drive to in about 20 minutes. There's one in my suburb.
Okay.
How
Well,
popular is it, right?
we'll see if they have like Friday Night Magic if you had the time to do it.
They have
Maybe.
Friday Night Magic.
Yeah. And when we talk about Magic here, even if you don't, you people listening out there, even if you don't play Magic, you got to pay attention to this one because we're talking about the state of uh physicality here and like an actual
Yes,
play. So this is
exactly.
completely relevant stuff. This is
Physical.
not just us geeking out about stuff people
No,
don't know about.
physical play. And when I
Yeah.
say board games, I also include card games, okay? And
Hmm.
even you can even
Yeah.
and RPGs, role-playing games as well, right?
Hmm.
Yes,
Yep.
people want to get together physically and do these things. And I've heard people say
Yeah.
something like, "Oh, couldn't you do it on the computer?" People don't play. And I said, "Well, I could, but that kind
Hmm.
of defeats the purpose." I have
Right.
a regular gaming group, board gaming group. We meet every 3 weeks. We go and we sit down and we play games. And board gaming and the
Yeah.
rest of it has always been a social
Hmm.
activity. It's as much about the
Yes.
chatting as the gaming. Right.
Hmm.
During the pandemic, one of the guys suggested maybe we ran some games, and it wasn't as popular. Well, it wasn't as exciting, you know. Yeah, it missed that. We missed that physical element of actually being there.
Right. Yeah. And just yesterday I played pre-release for the latest Magic set. So there we go. And the thing about Magic is, they've been trying to do the digital thing for quite a while, right? And like, I mean, they had Magic Online for a bit, and there's like other free digital ways to actually play Magic, like X Mage or Cockatrice. But Magic Arena is the current prevailing online Magic play, and many people play it, but they still come in for physical, paper Magic play, right?
Exactly.
Most people kind of like practice, test out their decks online, but then come in to
That's it.
actually play.
That's
Right.
exactly what I was
So
going to say. People tend to use it for practicing. That's right.
exactly, yeah, they
Yeah.
do that a lot for Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic and whatever else. So yeah, it's so what I'm seeing is parallel existence. The
Mm,
digital and the paper kind of feeding off each other, sort of.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
With I would suggest
So,
even the paper having primacy, the cards having primacy.
mhm,
Um,
exactly. Right. Yeah. But so I think that's all I had to say. Well, actually, beyond that, I kind of want to counter the bit of the learn to code thing because it's a very superficial way to kind of uh, uh, put that kind of imperative to play because it's never as simple as learn to code. It's because when you're a programmer, you're designing apps, and that's
yes.
the code is the design. You're not just punching in a bunch of code and hoping for the
Yes.
best. You're designing everything from start to finish, and you're unit testing, and
Yes.
you're uh, step by step and kind of iteratively. If you're doing something close to agile or something, you're doing a really software is a bit of a is not a bit. It's vastly a different animal from say house architecture, building architecture, and so forth. It's a different kind of architecture because it's soft. That's why it's software. It's malleable. You can iteratively change it, which you can't really do uh, um, uh, without
To build it or
tremendous
something.
cost for something that's harder. Yeah.
Mm.
So I can go
And
into a
and
whole tangent about that, but I don't know if we could trust AI to pick up the entire selector. They're gonna get some things wrong, I think.
and further to your point, there's a difference between programming and being a developer too.
Hmm.
Yes, developers are a subset of the people who know how to program. So there are
Hmm.
quite a lot of people who know how to program, but yes, development has all sorts of other skill sets around it, as you're
Yeah.
suggesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
guess.
speaking program, sorry to interrupt you, but
Hmm.
speaking programmer to programmer, are you familiar with Uncle Bob Martin?
Actually, I'm not sure I am. See, for those who don't know, I wouldn't call myself a developer, right? I work in other areas in IT. I
Oh,
do
sure, right.
code, right? But I work a
Hmm.
lot with networks and so forth.
Got
So,
it. Okay, yeah.
but yes, I don't, or I may have come across it, but go on.
No, no. I was just kind of bringing it up in case you did know that, and in which
Hmm.
case we'll probably have more back and forth. I don't really have to talk about him right now, but there's more to unpack. It's like, he, well, to put it short, he's influenced a lot of my development principles and so forth, and I think he's really good. He's one of the founders of the Agile system, and yeah. But one thing I've noticed that so. Yeah, he's had a lot of backlash due to his conservative leaning personal views. He stopped
Interesting.
getting invited to certain events and because of that, and has a lot of clashes. Now, I don't think Uncle Bob is infallible either because he makes a few gynocentric points about female developers, which I don't sit too well with me. But
Mm.
on the whole, you know, they're trying to censor him, well, or at least shut him down for having the wrong opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm inclined to defend him
Yeah.
on that. So it's kind of sad that this is the kind of thing we have to see in the developer world.
Within the IT world, there's definitely a strong bias towards the left and towards woke.
Hmm.
And of course, I'll clarify, as I always do, that there are people on the left who are anti-woke, but
Hmm.
the bias is very much towards left and woke. And
Exactly.
yes, there are other people who have experienced this problem. Eric S. Raymond is an example of that.
Mm.
He's a prominent figure in the Linux world, in the open source world, and he is, it would be fair to say he's a conservative. And yeah, he's had quite a bit of pushback
Hmm. Exactly.
from them, unfortunately. But yeah, so it is a bit unfortunate that that does occur.
Yeah. Yeah,
So much for
exactly.
letting everyone voice an opinion.
Mhm. Right, yeah. Yeah, and just like I said, I don't like some of the kissing up to the female developer that he does sometimes. But uh I want to be able to debate that, not shut him down, you know,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so that's the kind that well, so I call him Uncle Bob Martin. That's kind of what he's kind of mostly known for. But his real name is Robert C. Martin. So if you know him as that, that's probably in case it jogs your memory. That's really all I had to say on that one. So yeah,
No, so I had a couple of final points on AI then. First of all, something you said earlier about people would say, oh, there'll be, programmers will be out of work and so forth. Were this to happen, and of course, I've made my point very clear that this isn't going to happen, right? Were this to happen, I think the programming jobs and the IT jobs would be the last to go, not the first to go, right? There seems to
exactly.
be yeah, quite a number of people have made these pronouncements about new technology causing mass unemployment. Seem to think that the knowledge workers would be the first to go, while the guy working digging the ditch is going to still be working. Well, I don't think so, because if they could build a computer which would be able to do our job, they could probably build one which could dig the ditch too. But
Yeah,
anyway, yeah. So as I said, some jobs will go, but they'll be replaced by new jobs. And I have to say, in general, better jobs actually.
I agree.
Generally speaking, they're actually more interesting. And if you ask anybody who's in IT, I think that most people would agree that the type of work that is done today is certainly more interesting than the work that was done 30 years ago.
Mhm. Well, if you want to talk men's rights, like we do on this channel, and men's issues, technology really is men's liberation by men, you know? Because we're talking about, you know, liberating men from having to do very dangerous jobs, essential but dangerous jobs,
Yep,
and at
that is a really good
tremendously
point.
small pay.
Yes,
Basically,
yes,
because the
which
reason why those jobs are, small paying but very important is because of the abundance of the people who are actually able to do such a thing.
yeah, that's
So
right.
right, exactly. But because like hey, who wants to do this dangerous thing for marginally little pay uh and they'll you're gonna find quite a bit of people. But but that's the thing is that we can move on to better things and
Yep.
actually be able to live lives and still watch out for your fitness. Be sure you're fit and strong and everything like that as much as you can. But still, my point I think is made.
That makes a really good, you make a really good point, and it actually contrasts too to something like trades, which are physical but also skilled, okay,
Yes.
and of which in some trades there is a global shortage of tradespeople, and of course tradies are overwhelmingly men, as we know.
Mhm.
I think the proportion probably varies by trade a little bit, but if you look at plumbers, I think there's a global shortage of plumbers, and I don't know what percentage of women plumbers are actually women, but it's not large. So yes, this is a good point actually, but of course, there are still, I guess what I was getting at is there are still skill jobs that are physical that will, at least for the moment, still continue to be in demand. And yes, it may be that AI will replace some jobs, and maybe there are some physical jobs that will replace. And as you say, that will actually reduce injury rates and reduce the burden that put on the men who are doing those jobs.
Exactly.
Yep. The
Yep.
invisible
Yep.
men, as we like to say.
Right, yeah. Now, this is why I love original Star Trek. It portrayed a world in which technology and humanity basically work together. And that's what we
Yes.
should be aspiring to.
Yes.
And one of the bad things about new Star Trek is that we're trying to portray this conflict between the synthetic people
Right.
and humanity, right? Like, not that I've seen it because it's so
Mm,
bad I don't want to see it, but I think that's the general idea. After the fallout
mm.
with the Borg, whatever direction they went in, I don't care for that at all. I think it's non-aspirational. It's well. We've already ranted about that, so let's go somewhere
But
else with this.
I'm very much in the camp that, and I've argued this for many, many years, that computers and humans together are far greater, greater than the sum of the parts, as it were.
Hmm. Exactly.
But together we can do so much more than either of us
Right.
can do on our
Right.
own.
Yep.
And
Right.
I think that will continue to be the case.
And here's the thing about technology. Like the damn wheel is technology when it was
Mm,
invented, you know?
yeah.
And an abacus was the equivalent of a computer back then.
Mm, mm.
I'm kind of, I'm not being too exact here, but I think you get my point here.
Yes.
Right. And
And in
and
fact,
so
I was going to mention the Jacquard loom, actually,
mhm.
when we talk about the great
Yeah,
men of
right.
history, actually, for precisely this reason. Yes,
Yeah, sure. Well, so it's actually fortunate that our great man of history has to do with the very subject we're talking
it
about. So
is.
why don't we
Before,
just kind of segue into it?
I just have one very quick point on
Yeah,
AI.
yeah.
Just that you very briefly mentioned the copyright issue. I think this is a
Yes.
huge issue, and something I've actually tried recently, and I encourage everyone to try this themselves. It's quite interesting. I think on Chrome it will actually give you an AI response in without you asking, right? Now, actually, whether that's coming from Google, I don't know. Anyway, um, take a sentence from it and paste it back into the search engine and see what happens. And you'll actually see some of the source material start to come up. So it's
Hmm.
very clearly pointing to the fact that, remember, these things that are generated were written by somebody else without attribution. And this is actually a huge problem already because entertainers and artists are already pushing back on this and are developing and setting up class actions against AI engines and so forth. So this is something we need. Obviously, AI is going to be part of our future, and I actually have some AI plans for A Voice for Men.
Okay.
But yeah, but it has to be done in a manner which respects the contributions of humans and properly attributes those humans, because a lot of the current LLMs aren't doing that.
Right, yeah. So actually, before you're segueing into our great man of history, one thing I want to end off on with the AI thing is that one thing you'll notice is that I don't really use AI ever. At least not nearly as much as some other people. I don't like AI generated images because I don't like the aesthetic. There's something kind of so off about it that it's off-putting. And one thing you'll notice about me is that I don't like to programmatically do too much of anything. Ironic, right? Because I'm a programmer. But I don't like to sequence a lot of things, like especially in my music or something. The only thing I sequence really is the drum track. But aside from that, I
Right.
do everything manually. I don't like to autocorrect or
Your
digital
art.
correct anything like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And you know,
Yeah.
I do a lot of watercoloring. And any kind of digital stuff I do, I'm very meticulous. I use my stupid mouse. So it's a lot of more manual labor than most people think I should do. But I like what
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
And it's not just some kind of thing about being human or whatever. And I just like to be involved in my own work, you know?
Mm, mm.
Right.
And you know
And
exactly what's in there.
right. In fact, I don't automation. I kind of shy away from a lot of it so much that, in when I'm developing something like programming things in my API for my job or something like that, the more it does things for me, the more I'm kind of taken aback from it. I kind of want to
Mm,
type in my own code. I don't want it to necessarily, sometimes it's appropriate when there's some repetition in a certain line of code or something like that. But I don't like it when it kind of presumes that I want to do this or that. That's a good way for me to lose track of like a method or something or
mm.
other. So,
That's a really good point. So modern developers develop in something called an IDE, which is a tool which is
yeah, yeah.
helping them to develop. So I write code primarily in VI,
Okay.
which does have an IDE built in, admittedly,
Hmm.
but it more warns me about syntax problems and so forth rather than suggesting blocks of code.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yes, I actually use VI primarily to write all my
Hmm.
code.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. Let's no more distractions. Let's go on to our
that's
guide
right.
of
And some
history.
people are thinking, what's VI? Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's an editor that was written a long time ago, and VI is it's a long time ago, but it continues to be maintained and so forth. That old versions of it continue to
Hmm.
be maintained, but the name is a bit of a segue. So it is
Okay.
correctly pronounced VI. Some people will pronounce it Vi, which is not correct. Okay, and
Mhm.
I once heard someone pronounce it six, which I thought was priceless.
Oh, yeah, because of the Roman numeral. Yeah.
Yes, I thought that was priceless. But VI is the correct pronunciation. Anyway, that's right. The great men of history. Today, I'm going to talk about Charles Babbage. So, Charles Babbage was a 19th century mathematician and well, a bit of everything actually. Mathematician, engineer, computer programmer, as you'll see. Okay. Now, he is credited with inventing the first mechanical computer. So, for those who don't know, what we use today are actually, even though we call them computers, and I'll get to that, the name of that in a moment, they are actually electronic computers. But we dropped the electronic because that's pretty much the only sort we use. Before electronic computers were mechanical computers, and before mechanical computers were human computers. The word computer was originally a job title, one who computes.
Yes.
And
Yes.
humans used to be paid to actually spend a lot of time making computations. And it is actually true that the vast majority of computers in, say, the 19th century were women. So you would have actually generally, say, male mathematicians and a lot of women who would actually be working. See, there's women working again. So people keep claiming women entered the workforce recently. They didn't. There were lots of women who were working as computers. Computers, the human computer job is a job that was rendered obsolete by technology. Okay, but as we know, people go on to find other jobs. Anyway, mechanical computers started to appear after Babbage. Babbage originally developed something called the difference engine. So now he never actually built full-sized difference engine in his time because the technology of his time was actually lacking. He was paid quite a bit of money by the British government to do this. He did end up developing smaller ones that worked, but the full size one was not actually built until the 20th century. And in the late 20th century, one was actually built in the UK. And it was actually, I think it was a British Science Museum, was on display for a while. I think it was also in the US for a while on display. Anyway, so the difference engine was designed to solve polynomial functions. So that could be ax plus c or a quadratic equation for those who remember quadratic equations from their high school maths. If you didn't go on and do a maths degree like me. Anyway, as a bit of an aside to solving quadratic equations, mechanical computers started doing this in Babbage's time and continued doing it right up until the 1950s when they were largely replaced by electronic computers. Have you ever watched a World War II movie and they talk about getting a firing solution? Okay,
Well, I've heard the term firing solution.
right.
Yeah.
It's actually a solution of the quadratic equation. There are a few other things they can do too, but one of them is actually solving a quadratic equation. Because if you think about it, projectiles follow a parabolic path, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you know how far away the enemy ship is. You've measured that. You now want to know what angle you need to point up at in order to fire the weapon, right? In order to strike it.
Yeah.
So they would actually use during World War II, for example, and I think maybe a little bit earlier too, they would actually use mechanical computers to solve these things and acquire a firing solution for, say, if you're looking at, say, like one of the big battleships during World War II. They would
Mhm.
to fire those big guns. They would point them up. They might take 30 or 60 seconds to acquire the solution because the mechanical computers were relatively slow by our standards, and they would fire them. Anyway, I do think it's quite cute that we hear this term a lot in say war movies, but people don't really think about what it means. They are actually doing mathematical calculations which to work out how to fire. So the military, by the way, has been making use of mathematics for centuries for various things. So it's I think sometimes people don't realize how important mathematics has been throughout history, but there's all sorts of areas where it's been useful. And yes, they said the military have been making quite extensive use of it. So anyway, so Babbage went on to develop something called the analytical engine as well, which was a more advanced machine. And these two machines he was building, it was kind of done in parallel. When he built the analytical engine, he actually realized some easier ways of doing things back on the difference engine. So he went and improved the difference engine and so forth. But the analytical engine, which was never built in Babbage's time, the full machine, it was actually considered to be Turing complete. So, Turing completeness, I'll explain what that means. So, essentially, there's quite a bit to it, but an easy way to think about it is that if a Turing complete machine can process some data, then any other Turing complete machine can process that data. This is really what it means. So, Alan Turing developed a sort of a theoretical model for the modern computer called a Turing machine.
Yes.
And if anything that's Turing complete can be processed on a Turing machine, and a Turing machine is the model for the modern computer. So any modern so if what essentially what the shorthand is, if any modern computer can compute something, any other computer can compute that same thing. Interestingly enough, though, very important, Turing completeness doesn't say anything about how easy it is to do or how long it's going to take. So something might be very easy on one machine and very difficult on another machine. That's not what Turing completeness is about. All it's saying is if you try hard enough, you can get both machines to do it. But anyway, the analytical engine was actually Turing complete. So, which is interesting because this is going right. This is of course before Turing actually did his work because he was living in the 20th century. Another story there, right? So you could write programs on the analytical engine. So this gets us to Ada Lovelace. Ada Lovelace, you'll often hear people say she was the first programmer. Ada Lovelace has been raised as an icon for women in STEM. There was an organization called the Ada Initiative, which was advocating for women in free and open source software and women in STEM and so forth, which it's another story, but the Ada Initiative shut down very abruptly, but that's a story for another time. Anyway.
Yeah, right.
So, was Ada Lovelace the first programmer? In short, no, she wasn't.
No.
So, and we know this conclusively. Now, people who are a little bit more informed and still want to advocate for Ada have now taken to saying that she was the first person to publish a program. Yes, that's technically true, but Babbage himself claimed authorship of the program that she published.
Right.
I don't know if you want to jump in. Otherwise, I've got some thoughts on Ada Lovelace.
Well, she was basically kind of like a translator, sort of, right? And yeah, because
and publicist.
Yeah, exactly. So one source that people can look at this is so there's the website called Countercurrents, and there's an article on that site called Ada Lovelace Tech's Biggest Lie, which goes into a lot of detail about
Nice.
this myth that
I haven't seen that article, but I shall definitely look it up.
yeah, sure. Yeah.
So I've got a little bit on this.
Yeah.
No, thank you. So I've got a little bit on this. So because Ada Lovelace described an algorithm to produce a mathematical result and it was published, people saw that and said Ada Lovelace was the first programmer. As I said, she did publish the document was published, but Babbage himself in his memoirs actually claimed credit for the particular algorithm. But moreover, there are at least half a dozen to a dozen programs effectively, that he wrote for the machine that were done 3 to 5 years before this was actually published. So several years before this publication, he had actually already developed programs for the analytical engine. So in that sense, that would leave Babbage the first programmer. Okay, now and that may make sense in the context of a Turing machine. So in terms of the first, say, modern programmer, right? But as Vernon realizes, the concept of programming itself goes back a lot further. Yeah, exactly. So, in fact, I was going to mention oh, that's right. Before I mention that, I just wanted to. One of the things I found recently while researching this, because I knew that Ada Lovelace was not the first programmer, but I hadn't really looked into it that closely until
Yeah.
recently. One of the interesting things was there was a historian, Alan G. Bromley. He studied the subject extensively, and he also read a lot of the correspondence between all of the correspondence between Babbage and Lovelace that survives. And his argument is just from the correspondence, it was clear that she didn't really have her understanding of the machine was not good enough to actually be a programmer. So she really was, as I said, I think a kind of publicist. Um, but yes, it's a bit unfortunate then that she's held up as a figure by feminists as an icon for women because really she wasn't doing the right into the guts of it.
Well, as we know,
Anyway,
feminists like to grasp at straws. They
don't
like
they ever?
to, yeah, yeah.
Time and time again. That's right, exactly. So Babbage was actually inspired by the Jacquard loom, which was a type of
Mhm.
loom that would actually. So for those who don't know, the Jacquard loom used punch cards, which for anybody who's got any sort of IT background will know it was a technology used in IT up until the 1950s. And you would take a little card and you would punch holes in it, and where the holes were had meaning, and the machine would encode it, whether that's a mechanical computer during World War II or an electronic computer in the 1950s or a Jacquard loom in the 1840s. It would tell the machine something and then the machine would proceed to do it. And they would, textile manufacturers have been using this for quite a while to produce to do weaving and so forth before Babbage, started using this technology. And so yeah, so he used punch cards, and as I said, they were used right up until the 1950s, even into the 1960s. Actually, there were still punch card machines around, and people, in fact, possibly even a little later than that. Actually, maybe 1970s, older machines still running would have still been using. Because actually, I know some people about 10 years older than myself who said that early in their careers in IT, they actually used punch cards. So there were probably some older machines that were still sitting around.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So this is so it, and I've seen some sources earlier. I think there's they say the internet never forgets. That's absolutely not true. The internet forgets things all the time, as we've said on
Mhm.
previous episodes.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing a website about 25 years ago that went right into this topic. It was beautiful, and it talked about technologies in IT and how you could track them right back hundreds and hundreds of years. And communications technologies, how you could track them back hundreds and hundreds of years, and you could see that all these things that were supposedly revolutionary changes were actually evolutionary, and that the technology just before them gives you an insight into developing this more modern technology. I mean, even something like a telegraph, right? A lot of people don't know that before Marconi's transmissions across the Atlantic and so forth, there were semaphore stations.
Yeah.
Semaphore stations were optical transmission networks that were used throughout Europe, and when the British landed on the shores of France before the Battle of Waterloo, in what was it, 1815, they said that Napoleon in Paris knew they'd landed only an hour later, and that was because of France's semaphore network, where signalers on the coast sent a transmission, and it only took an hour to get to Paris. Which is, think about it for the time versus a guy riding where it might take him a day or two to get back. That's really quite significant. But you do see a lot of these technologies are really evolutionary, not revolutionary. And
Oh
that's even
yeah, yeah.
actually true. Yeah. And that's actually even true with things like special and general relativity. There was actually stuff happening just before special relativity, which
Mhm.
kind of pointed to it. Even Einstein himself said somebody was going to get special relativity sooner or later.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So anyway, so I've probably gone on a few different tangents there, but Babbage laid down this incredible work which laid the foundation for modern computing. He himself really picked up on work that was done before, but that doesn't take away from his genius at all.
Yeah.
People like Alan Turing a century later were able to pick up
Well,
on his work.
well, that's the nature of invention and what we call genius and
Yes,
greatness. We keep on picking up after somebody else's great work. It's not to
yes,
say that we're so derivative that we're not particularly original or anything like that, but there's always inspiration from before. There's
yes.
always more work to be done from something that was left off. So it's just an ongoing process.
Yep. And
And
humans get old, they get other responsibilities in life, they have other think about other things. They may leave that work and go do something else, and then somebody
right,
10, 15 years later picks it up and runs with it. Anyway, sorry, go on.
exactly. And this is why people, especially women who profess to speak, speak compassion and concern about men losing jobs or something, they're missing the point. Why are we, sorry, cloggy throat. Why are we going around saying that men need to have a sense of purpose again so they can get back to manual labor for us women? They want to see men toil.
Get
I've
back
made
on the
this point
plantation.
many times before uh, in AVFM and so forth, that women just they don't want men to have it easy. You know, it's okay for them, for the women to have it easy, but not so much for the men. They kind of want some kind of crazy sense of traditional masculinity in which the men has to be toiling and damaging themselves all the time, making themselves available to disposability. So
And one of my fears, in fact, at AVFM, it's been the case for maybe nearly 10 years now, where there's been a recognition that we're lurching back, or there's potential to lurch back the other way. I mean, feminism is in a much worse state now than it was ten years ago. I say there's a feminist civil war, that's what I call it. Woke has really been knocked back. It's not gone, but it's on life support. But the real danger at this point is that we'll lurch back the other way and we'll end up with
mhm,
traditional gynocentrism again. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Right,
That's the
yeah.
real danger.
Right, yeah. It's the traditional gynocentrism is pretty anti-technology for men.
Mm, mm,
Specifically, yeah. I
mm.
think they love everything that technology does for women because it makes their time easy while they still get the title and the status of being the trad wife and so forth. But they don't like men having uh, I almost said AIDS, which is not the disease,
No,
but I mean
that's
like assistants that aid in their day-to-day lives and so forth. They think that's unmanly for them to have any kind of assistance and so forth.
I also
Something to
see a
help
lot
them
of
get by.
I also see a
But
lot of men do that, and they'll often see the men will be the ones who will proclaim that men are, will instinctively want to serve society and so forth, and serve their wives and so forth. And they may well be doing that themselves, but yes, they're making the claim for everyone, which I absolutely reject. This comes back to this argument about the extent to which gynocentrism is innate versus a learned behaviour, which certainly
mhm,
Peter Wright has and others have done a lot of work on.
exactly. Yep.
Yep.
All right. So I'm noticing that we said that we're going to have a short show, but this is at least medium size, because
Yes, that's
we
right.
had a
It
lot to
turned
talk
out
about. We never know if we
exactly.
have a lot to talk about sometimes.
That's right.
So
They're interesting areas, and I'm
yeah.
glad that I picked Charles Babbage.
Mm,
He's an interesting figure. Yep.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. By the way, speaking of assistance, this is assistance. It's a fidget spinner, and me, fidgeting helps me. You know, uh, it's if I do this, I speak easier. I'm less
Okay.
nervous. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
so yeah,
yeah.
yeah. All through the episode, you've probably been catching me do this kind of thing. I think this is real fidgeting. I mean, this is okay. The spinning here thing. Maybe in a different episode, I'll show you my fidget spinner collection because they're interesting.
Oh,
Like what do you mean
nice.
they're a little more than just fads. Well,
Yeah,
at least
even I have one
so I
around here
say it.
somewhere.
What?
Even I have one around here somewhere.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
sure, yeah, but but programmers have some kind of helpers too, because you know what rubber duck programming is?
No, no, go on. I don't know that
So
I
it's
may have
something that
forgotten.
some programmers do. Like, so they run into a problem with their code, right?
Yeah.
So they talk to this rubber duck and they try to explain to it, you know,
Okay. I do know that
you
concept.
get
Yes.
the principle behind it,
Yes,
right?
I do. I do. You have
All right.
to, there's some places have a rule that before you can explain the problem to another human, you have to explain it to the rubber duck or the fish is
Yeah,
another one of it. Yeah, there'll be a toy
exactly.
fish there. You have to explain it to the
Hmm
fish. And yeah,
Exactly.
it is
Yeah.
true that sometimes explaining a problem will enlighten your own understanding, increase your own understanding of the problem. And yes,
Mhm.
it's very often the case you will solve
Mhm.
your problem. So yes, the
Right.
argument is instead of wasting another human's time, you have to explain it to the rubber duck first.
Yeah.
That's right.
This,
Yes.
this puts a bit of an interesting spin on the term ask the phrase ask and you shall receive. So a better one could be explain and you shall receive.
You shall receive. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yes,
Explain to a
I am
duck
familiar with that
and you
concept.
shall receive.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Anything else?
Only Zoe McLellan.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I guess I'll end off on something. So I'm not going to go too much into this one. Just sort of a quasi preview. We are going. We're seeing the gold pill pop up, and I think this is an interesting thing to talk about. Not
Yes.
today, because we're not quite as prepared, but I am going to have an article on AVFM on my take on the gold pill. It's going to be interesting. Let's see what happens. I like where it's
Mm.
going so far. So
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually. I agree. And yes, that is something that we're embracing at A Voice for Men.
exactly, yeah. So watch out for that.
Yes.
Mm.
So, Zoe McLellan, as of June 2025, a warrant is outstanding for the arrest of Zoe McLellan in relation to charges of kidnapping, child stealing, and child custody deprivation. McLellan is a public figure who has appeared in numerous popular television shows, including Star Trek Voyager, JAG, NCIS New Orleans, and Designated Survivor. Her face is familiar to millions. It is extraordinary that she has evaded detection for so long. McLellan was reportedly residing in an apartment in River Ridge, Louisiana in April 2021 and may still be residing in the area. McLellan grew up in the area of Port Orchard, Washington State, and may have returned to the area. Some sources believe that McLellan has left the United States and is residing in Canada or Costa Rica. Prior to disappearing, McLellan was known to use the alias Sarah Chandler. Anyone with any relevant information should contact the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Thank you.
All
See you
right.
next time.
Next time. Catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.